Gardena started as agriculture. It was at one time known as the berry capital of Southern California. But by World War I, the berry crops were altered to help support the war effort. And after that, the berries never came back the same way. The berry industry dwindled. By the mid-30s, this was somewhat of a cash-starved city. So when the opportunity to become home to games of skill arose, the city of Gardena's interest switched from skilled farm labor to games of skill. Ernest J. Primm arrived in Los Angeles as a child with his family and was a graduate of Hollywood High. In his early years, he went into the concrete jungle of downtown Los Angeles at a time when the city was wide open. It was Vice City. And he and his partner, Frankie Martin, ran and operated an illegal casino, sort of a speakeasy place above a coffin factory called the Edgemont Club. And this was all going on at a time when the forces of reform were starting to clean up the town. At the same time, the mayor of the city, Frank Shaw, was recalled from office. When the reformism started, all these people that ran these operations were driven out of LA, and it actually resulted in a casino boom in Las Vegas. But for Primm and his partners running the Edgemont Club, they could see that the writing was on the wall. Primm had a loose connection to Gardena's first mayor, a gentleman named Wayne Bogart. Primm came down here and struck a deal and took over what had formerly been a 500-seat movie theater that sat on the corner of the southern end of what is now today's Hustler Casino. In 1936, Primm and his partners did a $20,000 renovation on the property. That's about $350,000 in today's money. And they converted it into what I would describe as a skill games hall. And they played a game in there called Skillo, which was a game where you stand and you toss a ball into a numbered box, a series of numbered boxes. And this game was very popular. It was similar to something called Tango that was played openly at the beach communities here in the South Bay in particular. Primm also brought some of his illegal enterprise down here at the same time too. He operated poker games. They had some tables buried in the back of a location called the Gardena Billiard Club, which was down on Gardena Boulevard. And then behind the front of a phony candy store, the F&O Confectionery, Primm ran something similar to what he'd had at the Edgemont Club, which was almost like a full-fledged casino. People would come in like they were going to buy candy, and then they would just go through a door into the back, and then you could find the roulette wheel and everything else. And right away, he ran into problems here. Not with the local authorities. It was outside forces, the LA Sheriff's Department. There was one sheriff in particular, George Iron Man Contreras, who was very gung-ho about clamping down on Primm's enterprises and gambling all over the county. And they ran raids on these clubs. They raided the billiard parlor, the F&O Confectionery was raided, and then the Embassy Palace was raided for its operation, even though it was supposedly above board. It was in compliance with the city and legal. And they got it shut down. So Primm was out of business, but sometime later, in 1938, during a visit to a Santa Monica bingo parlor, Primm discovered that this bingo parlor was operating games of draw poker, commercial draw poker, legally and out in the open. And he thought, how could this be? And he went and spoke to the proprietor of the bingo parlor and said, how are you doing this without the law intervening? And the owner said, read the law. It doesn't say in there that poker is illegal. And it was true. When Primm dug up the law, the 1872 statute that listed all of the outlawed games for California, poker was not on the list. And the reason was because poker was played by the senators who wrote that original law. And they didn't want to put themselves in a position where they couldn't play poker. So they just left the words poker off the list. So armed with this knowledge, Primm's partner, Frankie Martin, approached the Gardena City Council and appealed that they should be allowed to operate commercial draw poker here in Gardena at the Embassy Palace. And the city agreed. And in the summer of 1938, they opened up again with 40 tables of draw poker. That didn't stop the moral crusaders of the community and the law enforcement of LA County from intervening again here. They were able to close down Primm's enterprise and brand it a public nuisance. Primm and his lawyer, Sammy Rummel, spent several years fighting in the courts over whether or not poker was really legal in California. And in 1941, they took their case all the way to the Superior Court. And then Rummel skillfully navigated this trial by citing the Municipalities Act of 1935, which made a case that local laws approved and enforced by local municipalities had the same force and effect as laws that were governed on the state level. And that would trickle down to local businesses and to legal games. And with that, they were given a positive verdict and they legalized poker at that time once and for all.